Let's start off with what are your top 3 priorities for the coming year?
All right, well, obviously with the family and law enforcement, public safety is a huge priority of mine, something I feel very strongly about. And economic development, as well as enhancing our parks and waterfronts. So those are my 3 big pushes this year.
Now, you served for quite a while on the Planning Commission in Oakley. How did that experience prepare for you for the City Council seat?
So, being on the Planning Commission, I really had a chance to work with the staff on a one-on-one basis, meeting with them every week prior to our meetings, and that gave me a new understanding of that level of, working together, and that helped a lot. And also being on the dais and up in front of a lot of people, that was a new experience for me. So it really got me a chance to get used to that prior to being thrown in there on election or on swearing day. So
was it a little scary?
It was a little scary. I was nervous, but I think the Planning Commission really prepared me to understand what being on that side of it was.
What are your ideas for boosting the staffing at the police department?
So I know the city has offered an incentive, which I think is great. And right now we're slated for 40 officers from top to bottom, including the chief of police. With some staffing issues, we're probably closer to about 35. And I would like to see continued support and advertising so we can get up to 44 officers, which would be 1 officer per 1,000 residents for the city. That'll be hard, but the hiring incentives and the really competitive pay is going to help us get there. I would also like to encourage that we get the staffing up so we don't have the burnout of the current officers that we have. And I think continuing to do our upgrades, offering the services, special services like the K-9 and the POP, school resource officer, the things that these young officers really want to get to is going to encourage them to come to our city and stay in our city. But if we stay understaffed and they are forced with overtime and can't go to those specialty positions, then they may look elsewhere. So I think continuing to support the law enforcement department, as well as some little things that we really want to see happen. I would really like to see happen in the city. I have a goal of trying to create a substation in the east part of town. Something that maybe we can share with other agencies like CHP or the sheriffs who patrol out there as well, keeping the cost lower but giving those officers somewhere that they can go so they're not having to go to the central part of town. And if we can get the officers up the way I'd like to, we can also have a 4th beat, because in the city of Oakley we have 3 police beats right now. One of them runs from the corner of Empire by the high school all the way up to Summer Lake. And that means an officer has to go from one end of the city completely to the other to take a call in their beat. And if we can create a 4th beat and a substation, then we would really be able to serve the city as a whole. So,
One other subject. At an earlier city council meeting before you got sworn in, one of your colleagues, George Fuller, raised a lot of questions about the planned Sellers Regional Park.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about that?
So I was at that meeting. I try to attend every council meeting prior to being there. Now I guess I have to be in them. And I believe that this park is something the residents want, something the residents have been promised, something that has been in the plans and in the works with the city for a long period of time. A lot of changes, a lot of trying to mold it into something that the residents want. And changing that away from a park, I just don't think is a good idea. I think the residents need it. I'd love to see baseball fields, at least 4, so we can start having tournaments and bringing in a lot of business and a lot of people from outside areas to come to our city and boost our economy. And so I think the park is exactly what it needs to be. What that looks like, we'll have to decide as a council, but a park is what it needs to be.
One big issue that apparently wasn't discussed too much during the city council campaigns is the issue of homeless, and particularly about the lack of a shelter in our area. How do you feel about that?
So as you know, homelessness is a nationwide, countrywide, worldwide problem, and it is plagued, everywhere. We all have the problem. I think Oakley's homeless population is a little bit less than some of our surrounding cities. So a shelter here may not work. Not that we couldn't or shouldn't have one, but we'd have to find a place to have it. So until that happens, partnering with our neighbor cities, working with mental health evaluation teams, having an officer dedicated to that specialty assignment, and working with the social services that we have locally, and maybe partnering with the cities that do have the space for those, I think is the way to go. I think it is an issue that needs to be talked about, and every city has it. Turning old hotels into places for homeless to stay is great. We just don't have those resources here in Oakley. So I think we need to figure out whether we have a need for a shelter here within our city, and if we don't, how can we help the surrounding cities by building that up for our population of homeless people.
During your campaign, what was the biggest issue that most of the citizens were talking to you about?
So in District 4, obviously, most people know the East Cypress corridor is a big issue. The evacuation route, the fires that have been out there before, the roads not being wide enough. All of these things in my district, especially, were the main topic that I heard. My district goes all the way out to Summer Lake, which is past Bethel Island, and so I would drive the road every day during the campaign, just so I really understood what those residents needed. The previous council has voted to do a lot of upgrades, expanding Cypress to 4 lanes, taking Bethel Island over to Delta, moving Laurel all the way out to Sellers. These are all going to help the evacuation of those areas, and I think that that's going to alleviate some of the issues that those residents are having. But as we know, a decision you make in government today is a long-term plan. So I don't want to take credit for something that's happened, but I want to make sure I continue to push those plans forward and make sure we're getting those things done, because that was probably the largest, between that and the railroad track signs not working over on Cypress, were the biggest issues I heard during my campaign.
Do you think there's been enough effort spent on an adequate evacuation plan for that
I think the
corridor?
city is doing what needs to be done. They've worked with a property owner for some rights to get through the property in the event of an evacuation. Those are not long-term plans. So the fact that we've already started working on the long-term plans with the expansions, working with the current developers to continue their road improvements, all of those pieces put together like a beautiful puzzle will eventually be an adequate plan. It's just a matter of timing and making sure they move forward.
To wrap out our interview here today, is there something you'd like to say to the citizens of Oakley on the eve of 2023?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to serving not just District 4, but all of Oakley. I'm here for conversations. I'm here for any issues. I want to be available to not just my district, but to anybody that may have an issue. And I really look forward to doing my best to build Oakley to be the best that it can be.
Very good. Speaking on behalf of the press, this is Chris Campos. I thank you very much, Shannon, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.